So it's wonderful to gather in the new year. We spent nearly a year and a half studying Shantideva, and we are beginning this new year with the Lojong slogans, which is another one of the classic compassion trainings. It's called the 7 Points of Mind training. And I want to point out as we start today that this training is organized and taught in a very different way than Shantideva, and that's why they are great companions for each other. So Shantideva started with how extraordinary bodhicitta is, how much we admire and love those people with bodhicitta, the great teachers who can be modeled for us. So it started with this extraordinary praise of bodhicitta and introducing it as a treasure in a way that we could immediately relate to, and then made a step-by-step training in complexity until it got to the 9th chapter, or the ultimate. And it actually is presented as a logical training. So Shantideva would build this gorgeous logic about how we can become compassionate by thinking ourselves through every situation. So the Lojong slogans are very interesting because it's set up in a totally different way. It's set up as a practice text. And like the basic practice text, for instance, many of you may have encountered Nundro. Nundro is the preliminary practices in all of the Kagyu schools. And it opens with the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. So similarly, this begins with the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. And these are very accessible contemplations. It's a way of reminding ourselves that there is a bigger picture in a way that we can understand and relate to, and that turns our whole attitude towards that bigger picture and towards practice. But then the next section that we're in now goes right to the ultimate. Remember, Shantideva presented the ultimate at the end. This is another traditional Tibetan format that says you can't know where you're going unless you have some sort of understanding. So if you want to fly to India, you have to know that India is there. And so you have to buy a ticket to India. Otherwise, you could be heading towards California. So a traditional way of presenting trainings is to say, okay, you may not understand what India is. You may have never been to India, but we're going to begin the training with just this thread about the ultimate, so that as you practice, you have an understanding that this is the big picture you're heading towards. And so we're in the 4 verses that create that foundation of the ultimate. And I find it interesting that the view is presented as both the foundation and the ultimate. So it's the thread of reality that we're experiencing, and it is the bigger picture of the essence or nature of what truth or reality is that we haven't experienced. And if we think about, for instance, science. So I'm not a scientist. I experience the world in a very empirical way. And the scientist can tell me that the table my computer is resting on is made up of all of these atoms, which have molecules and electrons, but primarily and essentially is space. I don't see it as space. My computer is resting on something as solid, but I have a sense that there's something bigger that I can't see and can't experience directly. And I don't understand at this moment how that is affecting my lived experience, but I have a portion of my imagination that knows there's something bigger. So that's the purpose of introducing the ultimate at the beginning of the text. The first slogan was what we see. All dharmas can be thought of as dreams. Let's approach the ultimate by seeing that what we see is not all there is, and there is a bigger picture to what we see. In the same way, there's a bigger picture to this table. The second slogan in the ultimate is the seer. The second slogan is examine the nature of unborn awareness. Unborn awareness is a reference to the mind. So we're not expected at this point to have a lived and felt experience of the nature of our mind, but it's introducing the purpose of practice, and the doorway to the bigger picture goes through examining I see, but who is the I that sees? Let's examine that. So as we go deeper and deeper into meditation, we see that all of our experience of the world is filtered or mediated through a sense that there is a separate, unique I that is doing the experiencing. It's as though we're in a self-referencing box. And the practice is inviting us to just take the lid off the box and see the interconnected nature of all of life and how that removes that totally separate, isolated I and puts that I into a much bigger picture. That we always have a choice of taking that lid off the box. We always have a choice of seeing that all that's happening to us and around us is in a functioning, interconnected, like jigsaw puzzle of a giant picture. And we always have a choice of responding within that self-referencing box, which leads to armoring our defensiveness or defenses, or responding with a warmth of the fragility and vulnerability of each and every human life coexisting in a giant ecology that is coexisting and affecting each other, and that when we respond with warmth for ourselves and others, it is a clarifying and supporting response that elevates or has the potential to elevate into the warmth of loving kindness the whole ecology that we're in. So when we think of this in terms of our practice experience, we're looking at how is it that we're always like a turtle going into that box and putting the lid on. And it's as though we're saying, I know my own experience. It's happening to me. I felt it. I know that it happened in just that way. And that's the referencing that keeps us in that box, as opposed to, oh, there's a shifting in this whole dream. Who is it that's dreaming? Who is it that is experiencing and feeling? Is the who just this individual isolated self, or is the who this ecology that's immense? So I'd like to take us into meditation. And, you know, it's not as though this is a test that you should be understanding this or able to immediately settle into some sort of direct experience of self and no self. It's more, this is the field of practice that we'll be working on most of our lives, trying to understand what is the nature of the seer and the seen, what's the difference between the isolated self-referencing box of the ego and the interconnected ecology of all that is like the table in front of me, more space than solidity. So let's take it into meditation just in the sense that the slogan invites us, examine, which is, let's apply our curiosity and see what we can learn about it. So let's start with a meditation. First, shamatha, so we settle our mind, settle in a way that is eliminating all the conceptualizations about it and taking it into experience, letting go of conceptualizing thoughts and patterns, and settling in whatever way we're able to today to just that open, spacious mind where the thoughts arise and fall away when we don't enter into their story. So let's start with a few minutes of that, and then I'll ask you some questions to contemplate. So, right now, each of us has been looking at their computer, has been listening. If I were to ask you, who is listening, hearing, seeing, you might say your name, but that's just a label. Exactly who? What makes up the I? Is it the body or the mind? Who is listening, hearing, seeing in this very moment? Where is that I? So science can tell us that all that is in front of us is pixels. All we're hearing is sound waves. Who is the I that is making sense, that is hearing the Dharma, that is seeing His holiness behind me? Where is the I that is knowing? you may be able to touch the sense that it's not just all of our thoughts about something, that there's a knower. The knower becomes aware of itself when it knows something. What is the nature of the knower without the something? Who or what is the knower that becomes the I, that leaves the I unborn? So this understanding the ultimate is a little like the history of science in our era. In science, we keep looking for the ultimate foundation particle. And, there are evolutions of microscopes that keep finding the no ultimate particle. Similarly, there are all of these doorways in meditation that are invitations to see if there's an ultimate I particle. And then the famous quote, it's the not seeing that is the seeing. So we're caught up in the illusion until we have the lived experience of not seeing. And again, this is not something we're expected to know or taste. It's more if we want to get out of that self-referencing box, we have to see there never was the box of the I. So, this will become the basis for changing how we see our everyday life and how we respond in our everyday life. But first, we have to have a little sense of this is the view that will allow that change. So I'm going to do a short dedication and then close the live Facebook for our discussion. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.